In this video we shall discuss stored routines. There are two types of stored routines in databases: stored procedures and stored functions or user-defined functions. The main difference is that stored procedures are used for manipulation of any database data and objects, while stored functions are used to enrich SQL capabilities. This is how it looks like in details. While stored procedures allow several in and out parameters, stored functions also allow several in parameters but usually return only one value. In some DBMSs, this value may be a table value. Stored procedures have its own call and results processing syntax, while stored functions allow built-in integration to any SQL query. Stored procedures may call other stored procedures and stored functions, while stored functions may call only other stored functions. Stored procedures may produce transactions, while stored functions may not produce transactions as long as they are called from SQL query and the SQL query is executed within transaction itself. Stored procedures have rich exceptions handling capabilities, while stored functions have limited exception handling capabilities or none in some DBMSs at all. Stored procedures may perform any data operations, while stored functions may only read data. Stored procedures may perform any database objects operations, while stored functions may only read information about database objects. Stored procedures may not be used in check constraints. We've discussed that check constraints a couple of videos ago, while stored functions may be used in check constraints. So the typical usage for stored procedures and stored functions is the next. With stored procedures, we may call them from triggers, from application, from other stored procedures, and so on and so on and so on. And we use stored functions to assist with some SQL capabilities that our DBMS lacks. Of course, stored routines have some pros and cons. Let's start with pros. We only need to write the code once, so it's easy to maintain, to update, to handle. Stored routines call syntax is more readable, more easy than the huge code that is encapsulated inside the stored routine. And as long as stored routines are executed on DBMS side, no data is transmitted outside of the DBMS. That increases the speed and security. Speaking about cons, we may say that there may be performance issues in case of ignoring query plans analysis, so we absolutely have to analyze those query plans in order to analyze how our stored routines influence the performance. There may be some security issues, but only in case of wrong permissions settings. And the worst is that testing and debugging may become more difficult in comparison to classical SQL query analysis. Nevertheless, the pros prevail, and so stored routines are commonly used in most databases. Let's look at several samples, beginning with the next. This stored procedure clears today's statistics every midnight. Here is the code, and we've already seen it in our previous videos. There, this code was used inside a trigger, but we may create a schedule event and tell the DBMS to execute this stored procedure every midnight, so then we may eliminate this procedure call from our trigger and leave it for schedule only. As long as our file exchange server has a lot of data to clear on expiration date time, here's the example of that data, we may schedule such a procedure call every 30 minutes to clear that outdated data. With stored functions, we may simplify our SQL queries. Imagine that we have to calculate some user status based on the following set of rules. The user status should be calculated depending on upload volume and upload count of files the user has uploaded. So this is the code. It is rather huge, but once we have that function, we may call it so easily from our SQL query. And as long as we have a lot of files, we may want to determine the file size in given measurement units. Once again, this is the code, it's rather complex, it's rather big, and here is the simple usage of that stored function with the result. Now let's see how it looks like in Sparx Enterprise Architect and MySQL Workbench. In Sparx Enterprise Architect we have procedure and function tools that allow us to create stored procedures and stored functions. As long as we already have some, we may right-click and select SQL Object Properties and see the code here. And we may edit the code, and then Sparx Enterprise Architect will encapsulate this code into the final export for creating of your database. With MySQL Workbench you have to create the stored routine group, and then you may place the code here. And once our stored routines are ready, we may just test them, check them. Let's execute such a code. You see here the result. This is how our function for file size normalization works, and we see it works perfectly. That's all about stored routines, and in the next video we shall discuss transactions.